So as we're going through the fifth chapter of Ketubot, we're really getting into the essential ingredients of married life, at least in the time of the Mishnah. But we can still recognize actually these ingredients today. And we've learnt the Mishnah that enumerates 7 kinds of work that a woman does for her husband: grinding, there's a list of 7. And we learned the Mishnah about a man who actually vowed not to have sex with his wife and the times for the conjugal duties which are prescribed in the Torah. And now, as we enter the 7th Mishnah, we're going to flip those around. Hamoredet al ba'ala pochtin la miktubata shiva dinarim b'shabbat. If a wife rebels against her husband, her ketubah is reduced by 7 dinari a week. Rabbi Yehuda omer shiva tropaim. Rabbi Judah says 7 tropaik. A tropaik is about half a dinar. So Rabbi Judah says basically 3.5 dinarim a week. Where does the 7 come from? I mean, there is a view in the Talmud that the 7 dinarim are actually related to the 7 kinds of work that the list of 7 earlier in the Mishnah that a wife does for her husband. But most of the commentators actually say, no. I mean, the Bartanura and the Rambam included just say, no. This actually refers to sex. That all the other types of rebellion, don't result in a reduction of ketubah, except that one. And so you can see why this is such a controversial Mishnah, because this allows the husband eventually to divorce his wife without her ketubah. And the Mishnah goes on, ad eimatai hu pochetet, how long does he continue to reduce? In other words, reduce the ketubah. And the Mishnah answers, keneged ketubata, in other words, the whole of the ketubah. So a wife that refuses to sleep with her husband can actually lose the whole of her ketubah. Rabbi Yossi omer, le'olam hu pochet veholech, shemati pol la'yerusha mimakom acher v'yachzor v'yiba mimenu. Rabbi Yossi says he can actually continue to reduce. And if she gets an inheritance from some other place, he can go back and apply. He can basically apply, and I think the sense is he can apply to the court to actually seize that. In other words, her net worth can actually drop below the level of the ketubah. And the Mishnah then goes on to say, so there is a parallel. V'chein hamored al ishto. And similarly, if a husband rebels against his wife, so we have the opposite situation. Mosifin la al ketubata shlosh dinarim b'shabbat. If a husband rebels against his wife, they add 3 dinari a week to her ketubah. And Rabbi Yehuda says 3 tropics. Rabbi Yehuda omer shlosha tropaim. Why the difference? Well, the Bartanura suggests that for a man not to have sex is kind of worse than for a woman not to have sex. A really interesting comment from the Bartanura. I'm not sure. It kind of rings very strangely with our ears today. And this is a really controversial Mishnah. It's connected, of course, to the ability of a court to force a man to divorce his wife. Because in the time of the Gaonim, actually in this situation, the court would force a man to divorce his wife. Rabbeinu Tam makes a ruling that a man can't be forced to divorce his wife. And of course, nowadays, we do have problems with men who refuse to give a get to their wife because of this ruling of Rabbeinu Tam. So this is a complex and difficult Mishnah. I can't quite give justice to it in just such a short discursus. But I just want to mention just how difficult it is. And then just go on to talk about the other kinds of service which a man has to give to his wife. Hamsharet or hamshareh et ishto al yedei shalish, someone who's providing for his wife through an agent. So this sounds like they're not living together. Maybe he's abroad. Maybe he has 2 wives in different houses. We're not quite sure. But for whatever reason, they're not coexisting. So he has to send her food. She's not eating at his table anymore. So the Mishnah goes on to say, Lo yifchot la mikabim chitin. He doesn't give her less than 2 covs of wheat. Arba kabot sorim, or 4 covs of barley. Barley is a really inferior grain compared to wheat. So the quantity is double. And actually, Rabbi Yossi is going to disagree. Amar Rabbi Yossi lo fasak sorin el Rabbi Yishmael shasamuch le'edom. Only Rabbi Yishmael, who lived near Edom, where presumably the economic conditions were different, granted her a supply of barley. In other words, in general, he gives her wheat. And that's not all. Noten lechatzi kav kitnit, he gives her half a kav of pulse, vechatzi log shemen, and half a log of oil, vekav gorgoret, or maneh devela, so he gives her a kav of dried figs, or a maneh of pressed figs, and figs used to come in both ways. And if he doesn't have any dried figs or pressed figs, he's got to supply her instead, or in their place, with kind of other fruit from another place. So we're getting some insight into kind of what the normal weekly income of a person would be in the time of the Mishnah. They need wheat, pulses, oil, fruit. That's the kind of basic substance. Of course, it doesn't stop there. Noten la mita umapatz. He gives her, he must also provide her with a bed and a mattress. A mapatz is some kind of mat you put on a bed. I think it's a mattress, although we're not quite clear. The Mishnah goes on, ve'im ein lo mapatz machletzet. If he doesn't have a mapatz, that we think that's a mattress, he gives her a machletzet. Now, a machletzet is definitely some kind of straw mat or rush mat. So it seems like there's kind of 2 kinds of mattresses here, but he has to give her one or the other according to his means. Noten la kapach l'roshai, gives her a half her head. V'chagor lamotneha, and she a girdle for her loins. Uman al mimoed lamoed, and he gives her shoes from festival to festival. So this is 3 times a year. 3 times a year, she gets a new pair of shoes. V'chelim shel 50 zuz mishana l'shana, and clothing worth 50 zuz every year. So her annual clothing budget is 50 zuz, which is, by the way, that's half remember the ketubot for a widow is 100 zuz, for a virgin is 200 zuz. So 50 zuz of clothing, this is a significant clothing budget, really quite significant budget. And the Mishnah is then going to specify, no tenla chadashim bimot chama. He can't give her new clothes in the summer. And I think the assumption here is that clothes are hot and we need warm clothes in the winter. Of course, if he gives her the new clothes in the summer, then they're going to be worn out by the time the winter comes. So he can't give her new clothes in the summer. Neither new ones in summer. And he doesn't give her worn out clothes at the time of the rains. In other words, in the winter. Because in the winter, she needs new clothes to keep warm. So he has to give her clothes worth 50 zuz, essentially when the autumn season comes. So when she needs them, he gives her the 50 zuz worth of clothes. V'hi mitkasa b'vlayotehen b'motachama. So whatever's worn out, right, she wears during the summer. V'hashchakim shela, and the worn out clothes actually remain her property. So in other words, she accumulates the whole of the wardrobe from year to year. He contributes clothes worth 50 zuz at the beginning of the kind of around autumn time every year, and then she wears them for the rest of the year, winter to summer.